I talk about anything. I don't care.
Yeah, that's my problem though. That's defamation. My first time meeting you in person, I hadn't actually met you. We were doing workshops at a school that must not be named, but is like never a great experience. It's one of those schools that's been renovated, so there's just like glass between all the classrooms. And it's like, oh, this is not great because kids being horrible is a contagion, and if somebody's doing it in one class, it's like the dominoes fall. But I remember looking over and I'm trying to do this is my very serious workshop. And behind me, you're there going, wigs for everyone. Someone in the morning had knits. You're going to have it by sixth period. And I remember you got the kids up and they were putting on outfits and they were assuming acting as characters and like putting it into their writing. And I thought, okay, this lady has the juice. And it's been really wonderful because not only have I experienced you through your fiction, I've experienced you through engaging with teens, getting them writing and reading, but then also they're really passionate about your work. 3 books in that ELEANOR JONES series, and now you're coming out with, I'm assuming, is a standalone. So it's a really interesting part of your career. How are you feeling about where you are on the precipice of a new release? Are you scared?
Yeah, terrified. So it's sort of, I joked that this standalone was like not ELEANOR. And it's a really scary thing I went in with no expectations. And so everything was this amazingly wonderful surprise with how ELEANOR landed, that I wrote it because that was the story I wanted to tell. And I wrote something that I would have loved to have read at that age, but also now. And so then to try and do something different is really scary because you think, well, am I risking losing the ELEANOR fans or being a one-trick pony that, oh, she can only do that style of thing? Or there's so many variables around coming out with a standalone that's in a different space.
Yeah.
So terrified actually.
What do you mean by different space? How is it? So first of all, define what the ELEANOR series, what makes the ELEANOR series to you?
So ELEANOR, I think ELEANOR is essentially a cozy mystery with teenage protagonists, right? That a lot of the, even though I still cover a lot of teenage issues and there's a murder at the heart of it, a lot of the heavy stuff happens off the page. So there's still humor and it's quite fast paced and action packed and fun alongside the other things that are going on. So hopefully there's enough layers that it's, that someone can find something in that. And then outside of that, it's very, very Australian. So a lot of the criticisms that younger readers sometimes have is that when they're seeking something relatable, people think they're talking about the characters. And sometimes it's not that. Sometimes it's the setting. And I think, you have written some very Australian spaces, which I would imagine you would get the same feedback about. I grew up with this kind of family, or I grew up, I recognize this space, even though I might not relate directly to the character. And so it's just as important when it comes to relatability. And Australian books are often encouraged to be transferable to an overseas market. And so it's a bit of a risk, right, to know that your book is not going to sell overseas because it's so Australian.
So what you're saying is this new book is like a cynical play at overseas.
Well, no, not even, because I've had people who've read it and they're like, it's still really Australian. I think that's what I do. But it is essentially set in a elite boarding school, which I certainly didn't go to an elite boarding school when I was younger. And so there's that kind of dark academia vibe. I think the readers who love that really lean into it and they're very fussy. So I really wanted to get that right. And I was worried that those that loved the Australiana of ELEANOR might be a bit put off by the fact that this is something that's in quite a different setting. I also had 2 characters. ELEANOR's told from ELEANOR's perspective. What Have They Done to Liza McLEAN is told from Benedict Hargraves, Benny, who's one of the rich kids at school, and Meg, who's Meg McLEAN is Liza's sister. And it's still point of view. So with alternating chapters, and that was nerve-wracking too. I hadn't written from a boy's perspective, and I also was writing characters. ELEANOR probably has quite a similar sense of humor to me. I crack myself up sometimes, even if no one else gets the joke. And writing Benny and Meg, they're very different, and so that was scary too, I think.
Taking a 50-foot view, now that you've written 4 books, 3 in one series, 1 standalone, what makes an Amy Doak book, or do you have no idea?
I definitely find that there are themes emerging as I go. I do love the found family, that kind of the side characters are just as important to me as the main characters, and they're all a bit quirky and unloved probably, and they all kind of find each other and find that being themselves is the truest way to find true friendships. And I think that that's just something that I come back to over and over again because it's probably my own personal experience. Um, and I do pacing's really important to me. I don't have much of an attention span. People
Who
talk
does?
about teenagers not having a good attention span, and mine's the worst. And so I know I'm critical myself when I read and when I consume film and television, and I want to be able to write that way too. So definitely pacing and knowing that you know, you will want to read it in one sitting or two sittings and just one more chapter and that kind of thing.
Is this your second book this year?
Yes,
Yeah.
the third Eleanor came out in
Yeah.
July, and
How did you do that? Like you've released them and
yeah,
a clip. That's like 4 books in 3 years.
right. So don't be fooled by that. So the first, when I had got the contract for the first Eleanor, I signed for 2 books. They
Yeah.
had accepted a sequel. So straight
Yeah.
away, I went into writing the second Eleanor book. So before the first one even came out, I had finished the second one,
Okay.
and I didn't know if they would want a third. Obviously, we needed to see if anyone liked it or if it would sell. And so I wanted to start working. I always like to be working on something, and even if I don't know if it's going to go anywhere. And the thing I started working on became LIZA. So when the first Eleanor came out, and I'd finished working on the second one, it was sort of locked away. We had done all the work on it, and I still had, you know, a good 6 months before it was going to come out. So I started working on what became LIZA. And then when Penguin came back to me and said they wanted a third Eleanor, then I really had to sort of get my skates on. But I wanted to finish what I was working on because that's where my head, that was the world I was living in at the time. And I was almost done with it. So I finished that and didn't sort of gave it to my agent and said, what do you think? And they, yeah, so in a way, I sort of had 3 books done before even the second book came out.
Okay.
Yeah, so it sort of seems like a lot has happened really quickly, but I kind of cheated. So,
So
yeah.
really, so if we're looking at, you know, you'd say LIZA and the third Eleanor are the books you've written since publication. Is it different
Correct.
writing, knowing you have an audience or having that audience in mind, you know, than
Yeah,
what it was in the pre-days?
I think you definitely have it in the back of your head, and especially, I mean, when you start getting feedback, you can't help but add those to the little people who live on your shoulder when you're working, right? And like, even to the point, I now will be drafting and I know what my editor would say about something while I'm doing it. So I'm like, oh, delete that, right again. And so I think that happens unconsciously anyway. And I'm really careful about who I take criticism from because of that, because I don't want to have the negative voice of things in my, I think it would stop me from writing altogether, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, definitely. I understand my young readers that have given me great feedback about Eleanor in particular. I know what they love, and they tell me what they love, and I feel like it's important to make sure I kind of maintain that to a level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So stepping away, you've written a trilogy and a standalone. Which one
Mhm.
do you prefer more?
In a way, when so I've just finished writing a fourth Eleanor. That's just
Okay.
yeah.
Has
So
that been
I've
announced?
uh no. No, sort
So
of.
you're writing nothing.
No, I think I can tell people. I can tell people that it'll be
Oh,
out
because
next.
everyone will be so angry. Like, oh.
And in a way, there's part of me that feels like I'm cheating when I start writing Eleanor again because I know her so well now,
Yeah.
and I know her voice so well. But the one thing that I underestimated about series is you have to carry on all of their stuff, right?
I did one sequel and that broke my brain because I can
Oh,
keep something internally consistent in one book, but then going
yeah.
back and being like, what did I say in chapter 2 of this
Yeah.
book? And it's just, and I was always the pedantic, like I am so angry at like the Monsters Inc. prequel for stuffing up something, like a one throwaway line that completely negates what's said in the first movie. And I'm like, I'm not going to do that. And it's just
Oh,
the
yeah.
worst. Okay.
And
And
if I was smarter, I would have had like this like Bible
a
where
story Bible, yeah.
I would have had all that information. I don't have that. And so, and I hate going back and reading stuff that I wrote, right? And so
Yeah.
I'm just relying on everybody else and I'm getting the details right at this point.
Yeah.
But so that's hard. So it's easy in one way and it's harder in another. And I think the same thing with writing a standalone was, it was really exciting because it's a whole new world and there's no rules yet and you can do whatever you want to do. But getting to know characters I find much harder. So, and even with Meg and Benny in What Have They Done to Liza McLean, I knew Benny straight away. He was really clear in my head. His voice was really clear. And I found his chapters really easy to write in the beginning, the first few. And that was that sort of exciting thing when you start a new project that you get. But Meg was like hard. She was hard to get to know. She was much more conservative and more cut off. And it took me a long way into that drafting process before I got to know her. So yeah, it's interesting. And I always think of, there's a quote by Lee Child that I read once that was, if you ask 20 writers what their process is, you get 35 different answers. Um, which I think is brilliant because it's sort of like every book's different and every writer has a different process and it just, there's no rules. There's no rules.